Hello. I'm not sure just how many people are on the line, but just by way of introduction, my name is David Johnston, and I'm one of the course tutors on the CIPD Level 5 program in Human Resource Management within SERC. And I suppose today, apologies for the absence of PowerPoint slides, but if and when you decide to join the course, you'll have plenty of that. But I suppose I just wanted to take the opportunity to talk through a wee bit about what the program entails, and for those who might be interested. I would absolutely encourage you, if you are in the field of human resources or are exploring the possibility of becoming an HR practitioner, to consider the course. So typically the course runs from September through to the end of May, beginning of June. There are 6 units in the course. Each unit lasts between 5-6 weeks. There's written assessments for each of the course. So in the previous years, the assessment has been between 3,000, 3,500 words on a particular topic. So if I start by talking through some of the units. So the first unit would be what we refer to as developing professional practice. And developing professional practice, I suppose, sets the context and some of the building blocks for what the human resource profession is about. So it's about familiarizing yourself with the HR profession map. That's the CIPD. So the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development have developed a profession map. Some of you who are listening in may have heard of competency frameworks. Well, the CIPD profession map outlines the competency framework for HR professionals, and the course and the course content is really built around what a competent HR professional is required to deliver and how they're supposed to behave, and so on and so forth. And so it's a professional course, and as I say, there's a set structure and a set sequence to it. So that's developing professional practice. We set the context for human resources. That's business issues in the context of human resources would then be the second unit. And that's all about exploring both the internal and the external environment. We get into looking at who our stakeholders are, both within the organization. So that might be employees, trade unions, senior management. And then we also explore some of the external stakeholders. So that'll be customers, potential applicants, in fact, past and present employees. And it's all about those relationships and being aware of the context within which we operate, because again, it's recognizing that historically, when we operated as a function, looking at transactional level activities, we were very much referred to, and it's a phrase I don't like, a back office function. Whereas the move towards human resource management is more about recognizing the fact that we need to be aware of what the front of house are doing so that we can help the front of house deliver. That requires us to have a greater awareness of the internal and external environment. So some of the models that we look at is the likes of PESTEL analysis. So that's looking at the political, economic, sociological, technological, legal and environmental factors that influence and affect the organization, and then how it also then impacts us as an HR profession, what we need to be aware of, and how we need to position ourselves to meet that challenge. Some of the other models we look at are undertaking SWOT analysis. Some of you may be aware the SWOT analysis is all about identifying strengths and weaknesses internal to the organization, and on the other hand, identifying some of the external opportunities and threats that might be facing. We're also looking at whether we're a profit-making organization or a not-for-profit organization. We're also looking at some of the competitive factors that we need to be aware of, some of the forces that affect organizations, such as the bargaining power of suppliers, the bargaining power of buyers, rivalry amongst existing firms. So some of those models helps us get an understanding of the business issues, the issues facing organizations, and what we as HR professionals need to do to help manage and control some of those pressures. We also look at how strategies developed, bottom-up, top-down strategy, how employees are involved in that process, how they participate in that process at all levels within the organization, because again, human resources have a central role and pivotal role to play in that regards. So that's business issues in the context for human resources. And again, as I said, there's an assessment then, 3,500 word assessment, written assessment at the end of each of those units, and it's scenario based. So the assessment brief might put you in a position as a newly appointed HR manager who has been tasked by the HR director with taking forward a piece of work, and you'll be asked to identify what are some of the external and internal factors that are impacting on the organization. What strategies might we need to develop to manage those situations, and how might those strategies be developed, etc., those type scenarios. The third unit then that we would move on to is referred to as using information in human resources. And again, it's quite an interesting, it's another building block, building on the work that was done in the first two units, but using information recognizes that often we will have to undertake and deliver projects. So we talk about project management, the stages involved in project management. We also look at research and undertaking research. So where do we go for sources of information, considering what those various sources are, the benefits, the disbenefits associated with certain sources. So for instance, some of the things we'll look at is the extent to which books provide us with an up-to-date source of information. And the sort of things we would cover off there would be acknowledging the fact that, as a rule of thumb, by the time a book it is a concept in somebody's mind and is put down in paper, goes through various drafts and rewrites to publication, it could be 18 months, 2 years out of date, the content. So we need to bear that in mind when we're relying on that in terms of the currency of the information contained therein. So we would also then look at some research journal articles which are perhaps more up to date. We would also then look in terms of using information in human resources, the difference between qualitative and quantitative research, and how to present information in a meaningful way. And presenting information in a meaningful way often depends on the end user. It depends very much on their learning style, their preferred style. Are they a visual person? Or are they a person who likes to read a lot of data? So that we learn about that, so that as HR professionals, as HR practitioners, get to know your audience, so that we can meet the needs of that particular audience, so that we can tailor the needs, tailor our project, our product, or our service to ensure that it meets the needs of the particular end user. And then we will learn some in using information in human resources. We'll also then learn about different research methods, different research strategies. So the use of surveys, the use of experiments, case studies, how we analyze that information, how we present it, the use of bar charts, etc., etc. So that's using information in human resources. And I think it's really important. Yes, as I was saying, the using information in human resources, we talk about research methodology, research strategies, but also then how to present that report. So we'll learn how to the executive summaries, literature reviews, putting tables of contents, findings, conclusions, etc., etc. So it's really, really important that at this level 5 study, that we're able to present coherent arguments in written form to key senior stakeholders. So that's using information in human resources. The fourth unit that we cover in the unit then is employment law. So again, I'm not going to insult your intelligence. As the name suggests, employment law will take the participant through a brief journey of how employment law is established. So that'll be looking at legislation, it'll be looking at case law. We will look also briefly in terms of the role of tribunals, conflict resolution methods, the law pertaining to working time, the law pertaining to national minimum wage, how to hire and fire people lawfully, albeit the focus of the course is primarily on how to hire people lawfully, because if we start the journey, the employment relationship, well, how do we fire these people? I think we're setting the wrong tone right from the out. So that'll take us in the journey in terms of employment law. But given that it is a 6-week unit, there's limited information that we can cover off, but we will cover off the main aspects of that particular unit pertaining to employment law. And then again, at the end of that, there's a written assessment where you're given a scenario, again, probably set by the HR director, where you're then asked to make sure you're given a number of activities and you're asked to advise the organisation on how best to deliver those activities. I should have said some of the other things we look at in terms of the employment law unit are the likes of CIPD. So that's the transfer of undertakings for the protection of employment. Don't get too distracted by that fancy terminology just yet, but whenever you get into the course, you realize that that's all about whenever an employer ceases or a function transfers from one employer to another employer, what steps are in place under employment law to protect the terms and conditions of the transferring staff. So that's the likes of CIPD. We'll also then cover off some things in terms of change management. So that might include where there's a need to relocate staff. How do we do that lawfully? How do we do that so that in such a way that we avoid the likelihood of legal challenge or the possibility of grievance? So that's employment law, that's unit 4. And then we're moving towards the end of the course. So we move then into employee engagement is the 5th unit. And employee engagement is employee engagement is a really interesting, and I think another pivotal aspect of the course. And one of the models we look at, or it's not so much a model, but there was a report produced a number of years ago by a chap, McLeod, and his colleague Clark, and it's Engage for Success. And it talks about a number of enablers that effective organisations use to ensure high levels of engagement across their workforce. So we look at things such as having a strategic narrative with effective leadership. We'll look at the importance of giving employees voice. So putting mechanisms in place that allows employees issues to be aired, for their concerns to be raised, for their ideas to be listened to and taken on board. We'll also then look at the role of managers and the engaging role that managers play in enabling and getting the best of their workforce. And we'll also then look at acting with integrity. So that's the we said you did and walking the walk. And then we'll put that into practice in terms of, well, how do we measure whether our workforce is engaged or otherwise? So we'll look at the likes of staff satisfaction surveys. Typically they would be done on an annual basis. We'll look at the pros and cons of that. Some of the cons associated with annual staff satisfaction surveys, for instance, are that it's done at a point in time. It's a snapshot at a particular point in time, which means that the findings could be influenced to a greater or lesser extent by factors that might be in play in the operating environment at that point in time. So, by way of example, if you conduct your staff satisfaction survey immediately after a significant bonus launch has been given, that might give you one set of outcomes. Contrast that with if you survey your staff immediately prior to or immediately following a significant round of redundancies. That might also give you a completely different data set. So that's some of the cons associated with annual surveys. But then we look at other initiatives such as pulse surveys, so shorter, snappier surveys in year, and so we get a better idea of staff sentiment throughout the year. So that's employee engagement in a nutshell. And as I say, then there's a written assessment where we test the learner's understanding and practical application of the employee engagement module. And then finally, and we're into towards end of April, beginning of May, we then move into our final unit, which is improving organizational performance. And that very much builds on the employee engagement unit. So the improving organizational performance recognizes that there's a number of factors that can influence either to the good or to the disadvantage of staff and employees. So we look at the likes of values. So do we actually look at our recruitment policy in terms of, are we attracting people in the first instance with the appropriate set of values and principles into the organization? Because if we do, that's part of the journey. But then once we bring those people in, what do we do? So do we just, okay, you're appointed, here's your salary, crack on? Or do we have to bring those people on the journey with us? So we'll talk about such things as the employee value proposition. So that looks at how we attract, how we recruit. We also then look at how we develop people, how we reward, how we recognize, and how we get the best of the people. So some of the terms you'll hear us talk about are discretionary behavior, discretionary effort, high performance working systems. You'll hear me talk about the AMO model. So there's various models. We talk about people and performance link, but when we talk about AMO, AMO for me is about giving the people the ability, the motivation, and the opportunity. And if you give people the ability, the motivation, the opportunity, and assuming that you've got appropriate training, appropriate reward packages, developmental career pathways, talent management strategies in place, that leads to high performance outcomes, which leads to competitive advantage, which leads to the organization then remaining profitable, remaining viable. That has long-term consequences for both the individual in terms of the employee. It has long-term beneficial benefits for the organization, but also it has implications in terms of wider society. So we then talk about corporate or social responsibility. And in that unit, we'll also cover off things such as, being aware of stakeholders and stakeholders' interests, being aware of how our own HR policies and procedures and the leadership styles that pertain within the organization can influence the degree of performance that both individuals and groups of individuals then deliver for the organization. So that's a very, very quick run through of the 6 units. I should also say that some of the units, so at the beginning of the unit, developing professional practice, we'll ask the students to develop a professional development plan. So that's identifying, essentially that's identifying not only what you want to get from the course, but also how you're going to satisfy some developmental needs, whether that's through formal training, whether it's through mentoring, whether it's through sitting with a more experienced colleague or job shadowing. So that'll be your professional development plan. We'll monitor the progress towards that throughout the course, the duration of the course. But at the end of the course, what we also ask is for the participants to, well, not complete at the end, but to submit at the end a reflective learning log. A reflective learning log will actually, I suppose it captures in essence some of the main learning points that the person felt was really important throughout the course duration. And actually, there's a lot of theory that suggests that reflective learning and reflective practice is really, really important. And I would concur with that in terms of ourselves as HR professionals. So the learning that you get in class takes you so far, but then the reflective practice and your ability to apply that learning both in the work context and your day-to-day life is also equally important. So that's a very, very quick run through of the course. As I say, 6 units. Each unit has an assessment, and at the end, then there's the reflective learning log. But I would say it's quite an intense program at level 5. You would expect that, but we have a very, very high success rate. Myself and my colleagues who also teach on the course are there to support. And one of my strap lines, if you like, is failure is not an option. We're there to support students, participants. We're there to make sure that they develop as individuals and as HR professionals. We're not there to trip anybody up. And I have to say, in terms of the feedback that we've had from participants to date, it's been really, really positive. And in that regard, one of the other terms you'll hear us talking about throughout the course is this notion of imposter syndrome. There will be people who will start the course, and in the first week or so, they'll be saying, should I be here? Am I qualified to be here? I'm not sure that this is for me. I'm not sure that I can pass this course. But as the weeks and the months progress, and as you get the first couple of assessments out of the way, all of a sudden the confidence starts to grow, and all of a sudden with confidence comes competence. And it's really, really good to see the participants as they progress through that journey. And then at the end, May, beginning of June, just get them to reflect back on where they were in September. And it's amazing just to see the change in individuals as HR professionals. And it prepares you for middle management positions, both in public, private, or indeed voluntary sector. So I'd say that's a very, very quick run through of what the course contains, and I'm more than happy if anybody has any particular queries or questions to address them now, or alternatively if you want to reach out through the course or through the college. I'm sure that any other questions or queries can be directed to myself or some of the other course tutors on the level 5 program. But say over to yourselves. I see there's 1 or 2 attendees that are still online. If you have any particular questions, I'll try and answer them. Okay, so unless there's any question, I don't know, Gareth, in case there is anybody still listening in, if they appreciate this forum's maybe not intuitive for everyone just yet, but is there another means that if they particular queries that they can channel them through?
Or just through the website. There's some query forms on the website, and then they can probably go through the course descriptor as well to get more information, and then contact yourselves by email.
No, that's absolutely perfect. And just on that, folks, and thank you for that prompt there, Gareth. But what I would say is certainly my email address. So my name, I think I said at the beginning, my name is David Johnston, one of the course tutors on the CIPD Level 5 program. But my email address is djohnston, so that's djohnston @serc.ac.uk. And I'm more than happy to take any questions that you may have with regards to the course content, or any concerns that you have with regards your prior study. Again, I should have said at the beginning, it's not uncommon for people who maybe haven't studied for quite some years or quite some time to be a wee bit apprehensive about joining the course. Those fears are very, very quickly allayed. And what I would say, yes, we will have people who are joining the program who are coming from having done degrees or indeed postgraduate level study, but we will equally have had people who aren't coming straight off the back of academic courses, who may not have studied for 10, 12, 15 years. Everybody's at different starting points, but everybody reaches the same endpoint. We, myself, Terry, and Claire are there to support you on that journey.